Yeah.
And that then gives me the pleasure of being able to introduce Harriet Ng'ok. Harriet is an incredible person. I think I'm learning on this trip how mischievous she is. So sometimes, sometimes she'll say things and you're like, wait, is she serious? So you really have to watch her eyes. If they're twinkling excessively, right, then you know she's maybe having you on. Harriet is the founder of a company known as Harriet's Botanicals in Nairobi, Kenya. Its focus is on African botanicals, and Harriet will kind of explain the origins of this company and the products that they make and share that deeply with us. We were very, very honored that she also shared this with the gathering in Nairobi, and there was a lot of questions and engagement around this kind of continuum that she exists in, which is somewhere between medicine, general wellness, and a deeper understanding of what the human body is and can do based on our past and kind of coming forward into the present. Harriet, interestingly enough, was a finance consultant and investment banker. So it's really interesting that now she's essentially a medicine woman. So she'll tell us about that. And she has come from being a person who understands these trees and shrubs and botanicals and come all the way to even lobbying successfully the government, which had never done anything like this before, into getting patents and copyrights and trademarks that still respect the people's and the community's ownership of these trees, but then that also respect the work that she's done to develop unique and individual products that enable general wellness for men, for women, for people, for children, and more. So Harriet will tell us about that. And then she'll also tell us about how her objective is to create a market for African-sourced herbal products locally and in the diaspora, and develop sustainable business practice around communities and conservation. And it's really interesting that we're having this conversation in Iceland, which is known for judicious and intentional use of natural resources in the processes of healing, making skin better, making digestion better, and what have you. So it's a beautiful place to have this conversation. And so we'd love to welcome Harriet to the stand.
So thank you so much, Njoki. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me. I'm honored. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself, just to put this into context. So my name is Harriet Chebet Ng'ok, and I am Kenyan. So I'm a founder and CEO of a company known as Harriet's Botanicals, where we retail traditional indigenous medicine sourced from the Southern Rift Valley for the urban African population and the diaspora. So yesterday when I was listening to Njadi talk about his grandfather who was in the Mau Mau, I wish I could tell you a similar story, but mine is completely different because my grandfather and his brothers all were police in the colonial administration. Actually, my grandfather himself was the driver for the governor. And that enabled him to take my mother to school, and my mother, by the age of 7, was actually in boarding school, and she speaks fondly of a lady called Mrs. King. So my mother was already taken away from the village very early, an outlier. She's a graduate. I'm second-generation graduate. She was the first Kipsigis woman to get an upper second class in business, unheard of the time. And then on my father's side, again, another outlier. My late father was an economist with 5 degrees, a PhD, and he worked for government. So I myself, I went to university in London at London School of Economics. I have 2 degrees. My master's in international banking and finance law, and I worked in derivatives, exotics, credit default swaps, all that stuff that was happening in 2008. I was actually in the thick of it at the time at JP Morgan before going to Goldman Sachs. So why I tell you this story is I really want to emphasize the fact that I had this Western education. I am the role model colonial subject, so to speak, and I had ticked all the boxes except one. So I suffer from a condition called endometriosis, which was undiagnosed at the time. So because I had good health insurance, I was living in London and I had access to doctors. I was in and out of hospitals, including surgery. And I went through the whole gamut of being told there's nothing wrong with you. But what used to happen to me every single month for 10 days in the office was an absolute nightmare. And that included mood swings, breathing pain, vomiting. And at the time, I used to feel as if I'm not quite fitting in because I was a serious go-getter. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to be like all those people you see on Wall Street. I was going to be the first Kipsigis woman on Wall Street. But that didn't really happen as planned. I kept getting sick. And that is how I sort of like got very familiar with the alternative practitioners, Reiki, yoga, anything else you can think of, I knew it. I knew about like essential oils, I knew about flower essences. I actually went on courses for all those. That is how I discovered how to make medicine. I used to make tablets out of herbs. I even, experimented with magic mushrooms for pain. I used to go to all the alternative sites. And that is when I really got familiar with the apothecary tradition of Europe. So time went on, and this was a long time ago because I was working in 2000 to 2008, thereabouts, and a little bit later. And my problems with my periods actually started before that. So we're talking to over 20 years. Now in 2017, my father passed and I was home. And before we left, this lady said to me, in Kiswahili, utanyesha, which means you are going to have a period. She told me, on the day they're burying your father, make sure you've carried, it's a lot of information, but it has a context. So actually that day, first thing in the morning, like at 6, I was in a lot of pain, and it's like literally I couldn't move, so the funeral could not continue. So as I came out, like kind of hobbling, because now you're in so much pain, you're just kind of like hobbling, this woman approached me, and she was my auntie, like my mom's cousin, and she said to me, oh, we now know what the problem is. Tomorrow, we're going to bring you medicine. And she said dawa in Kiswahili. And I was amused, but yes. So she brought me this medicine. And for the first time in my life, I had a painless period. So I took it back to Nairobi, and I gave it to my friend who was on her way to a hysterectomy. And then she canceled her hysterectomy, like everything stabilized. And this is how this thing exploded. Now, because traditional medicine in Kenya has a big stigma, and actually most people think when you do this kind of work, you're what we call mchawi, you're a witch. And we have the Witchcraft Act of 1959, which outlawed all practicing of medicine by Africans. So most people just think that you're like a concoctionist of sort. And I remember my friends would call me a miti shambares, like somebody who deals with meaty trees. And I think when that person was giving me that name, it was derogatory, but I embraced it because I was now having a good time, endo wasn't a problem for me anymore. And it's like the number of people who started coming to me just directly, I heard you have a cure for this, I heard you can alleviate my period pain. And this particular product we discovered, it's called Arorwet, because we kept the traditional names for a reason. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Like it deals with conditions like endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, painful menses, primary infertility, secondary infertility, and menopause as well, because it has a hormonal component. So this product exploded, and we were just selling and selling and selling. Up until now, we have 3,000 customers every single month. We sell in the diaspora, we sell in Australia, we sell in America, we sell in Saudi Arabia, we sell in all of Kenya. We have 11 outlets. This happened all in 3 years. And in that time, I got the patents, I got the copyrights, and I engaged with a lawyer. I grew a team. I have 20 employees. And in the villages where we source from, we have up to 300 people working at any given time in community engagement programs, because we must make sure that the trees remain, that they are harvested sustainably, and that we replant them. So what has this got to do with sort of communities and the forest? So first I was telling you the story of how I came full circle from where I was, from an investment banker to a Miti Shambares, which I am very proud of now. Miti Shamba brought me here. Investment banking would have never brought me here. And I was sort of really intrigued by the fact that why Iceland? And the first thing I noticed when I came here is these natural wellness products that the country has managed to monetize and commercialize, but in a gentle way so that value remains here. You know, people don't lose. These things are not destroyed because people are using them, or that you're not exporting them until there's nothing left here. So I think my anti-colonial approach to nature, especially with the indigenous forest, is naming the trees in the traditional language, because that means that the people in those communities understand this is so valuable, we don't cut it down for charcoal. So as an example, for one tree, Prunus africana is very famous. You may have heard about it because it is used to treat prostate cancer, especially in Europe. So what happened in the 70s, some Africans colluded with some Europeans to actually destroy forests because of this Prunus africana. And it's extremely valuable. It's worth billions in the market. But the strange thing is that the Africans themselves, who are living in the forest, didn't even know. They just saw log people coming and taking away trees and trees and trees, and they didn't know that the value in Europe was unbelievable. And you can imagine how that money would have transformed that community if people had known. So we then keep the traditional name of Prunus africana is Tendweit. In Kikuyu, it is Moiri. So we have a program where we identify trees in different communities. So we say, we have it, you have it, they have it, we all have it. So don't cut your tree down for charcoal, which is, you'll get $80. But if you keep your tree and sell it to us, you'll get $20,000 for the year. In any given year, we'll use 2 trees to service all those customers. So then we have a tree planting program to make sure that in 1,000 years, we're going to find the trees as they are. So even as we speak about sort of ancestral memory, it's intriguing for me the fact that my grandfather's brother, who was also the chief at the time, because my community is syncretic. When I say syncretic, it means we can embrace Christianity and African traditional religion. You know, like we're Christians at the top, but over here, we're African spiritualists. So he was a spiritualist, I got to know later. And even this auntie also is like a pseudo-spiritualist. And funny enough, then the tradition was passed on to me. So I speak about, you know, like ancestral memory. What does it really mean? You know, how is this knowledge passed? And how do you then, so there's a big spiritual component in African traditional medicine. Actually, most people, I do have clients who say to me, until you speak to me and say, you will heal, I don't believe I will heal. I'll give them the product, here's a product. And they say, no, will I get well? And I say, of course you will, it's scientific. And they'll say, no, will I get well? And then I say, yes, you'll get well. And that sort of eases the burden for everybody because, to be honest, you know, it's not that I know for sure. Actually, I don't know what will happen, but you must give out some type of hope. And that is sort of like the psychological and the psychic way, you know, Africans interact with traditional medicine. And you'll be surprised to find that 80% of Africans on the continent are using traditional medicine, but under the cover. So in a sense, it's like they'll use it, but not really tell the authorities about it. And then worst case scenario, they'll go to hospital. So what we must do is bring the medicine out so that everybody can use it. So now we talk about, I can quickly go through my slides. I just wanted to give you some background. And we might go back and forth on some of the things I have mentioned. So indigenous knowledge systems, plants, trees, bushes, and vegetation. I just want to show you, this is where traditional medicine, this is where it comes from, the area that I work. It's called Lelaitich, and in that alone, there's something like 300 species of traditional indigenous medicinal plants. So just to show you what this vegetation looks like, this is actually a very famous medicinal plant. And what's interesting about why I picked this one out is because there's a song that the parents teach the children. If you ask the children there, what is this? You only see it in the rainy season. So this is tiondo, it's an animal. And why they tell you that is poisonous. So it's very interesting, we talk about narratives and stories, and how do parents and communities communicate about certain things. Like when you're in the forest eating berries, the way Njadi was saying, he was eating blueberries and mulberries and all the wild berries out there. When you come across this, you remember what your mother told you. And so stories and narratives are very important in these cultures. Others, these are very common, like that one is called the black-eyed Susan. It is medicinal. The ones on the right, I don't actually know the English name, but they actually only grow during the rainy season. Immediately it rains, in a few days you see those. that is me in the picture in that very same ecosystem, because I want to put myself in the narrative. Other than objectifying, it is not something, nature is not something outside of me, and this is not happening to me, or I am part of the whole process. I am part of the narrative. I am in the story. In as much as I am speaking about other people being anti-colonial, I also need not to be so greedy and extractive in the same context. Again, I am in the photo. I am in the, this is when actually we went to do community engagement. And I was sitting outside as we had spoken to 40 women practitioners. So I asked, you know, who came first, the forest or the community? So you see, this whole concept of ownership really is very interesting. Because in the community, if there's a tree standing right next to you, or you live right next to the tree, you don't own the tree, because the tree probably was there before you. You didn't plant the tree. Who planted the tree? Who gave you ownership, right? And you really can't pass the tree on to your child, because you say, okay, this is our tree. So this concept of ownership is part of colonization. So I remember when I was studying English legal systems in my first year at university, I learned about something called terra nullius. The terra nullius principle means that when Europeans came to a place, there was no one owned the land, because when they asked the people who owns the land, there was no ownership of land. You know, you can't own air, you can't own land, you can't own water, you can't own the ocean, you can't own the airspace. But we do, in the modern context, there's countries which own the airspace, right? You can't take it with you anywhere, but you own it. Similarly with land, the land was for communal use. And this is where sort of like the Africans were caught a bit flat-footed. Nobody owns it, okay, we'll take it. And if you want it back, we have bullets here to demonstrate something that may not be so pleasant for you. So in a sense, it's only now that, you know, Africans now have to live, because in a sense, we are still living in a neo-colonial context. We have to live with borders. We have to live with land titles. I mean, I know back in the village, everybody is struggling because their grandparents passed the land on, but they don't have a title deed, which means they can't go to the bank and borrow money on land that they supposedly own. So this is very, very interesting, this whole concept of ownership. Even for us, when we take from the tree, or we create a formula, but we are not allowed, I mean, traditionally speaking, we could go and create a formula and do the intellectual property and everything, but other people are allowed to use the same formula. The community is allowed to use our formulas if they have them, or whatever modification they'd like, and they're allowed to sell them and profit. So that is our first sort of anti-colonial. We don't refuse other people from developing the same things they have been using for thousands of years and to monetize them. Okay? So we talk about language, narratives, and stories because this is now a hut that sits in that ecosystem. So it's not like there's this, you know, African sort of like beautiful forest. People are living there and interacting with the environment. I think it was really important for me to keep emphasizing that, you know, there is a context to all this. Let's see. Similarly, this is another picture I took because this cactus is medicinal and used by everybody for the fences. I mean, I find it such a beautiful environment. It's really quite magical out there. And more so, same environment. These are pictures that I took, sort of just, well, it was really just a memory for myself before I came back to Nairobi. And finally, I am in the picture again to illustrate and demonstrate and be very intentional about the fact that I am in it. It is not something that is outside of me. And so I am also part of, you know, like, if there's new narratives I am creating, I am here in Iceland now, speaking about my culture and my community. I am creating a narrative. And you are part of it now, in the sense, people who had never heard about the Kipsigis or the Kalenjin or traditional medicine, people who didn't know what we were doing out there. So on to show. Now we talk about extraction, renaming, and ownership. So this picture I took when I was, this land, all of this, and the next slide, this is tea. So all the tea in Kenya, particularly in the Rift Valley, actually is part of the Mau forest. Nobody talks about the fact that the tea plantations owned by multinationals is the original Mau forest, because we have the EU trying to, you know, like working with us to conserve what's left of the Mau forest. But nobody talks about the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hectares that is under tea. And what then happens when this is under tea? All this is now tea, you know, like the green flat. But even that forest is not even an indigenous forest because the tea farms need firewood to convert this green tea into black tea. They're now removing indigenous forests and planting this exotic trees like eucalyptus. Eucalyptus uses a lot of water. So by doing that, it looks like a nice forest, but it's actually making the place very dry. And this is typical illustration of this has a huge impact on climate change. The weather in Kenya is changing completely. And you know, you might be having your tea thinking, oh nice, this is so nice Kenyan tea. But the fact that we have to have plantations of this means now your glaciers are actually melting. So this, some of the things I'm talking about, the anti-colonial approach, this is again very colonial, it looks beautiful. Now that is me in one of these forests, like a dryland forest where I found this huge, like a gourd, like where this very strange plant that nobody knew, what is it for? And it's like an above gourd, it's like soft, and it's got lots of water inside. And what I discovered is that they survive for thousands of years, those kind of plants. And animals, when there's a drought or an extended drought, animals and humans were surviving. So it was just an illustration of something indigenous. This is when we started our process, documenting a little bit more. So this is a medicine bag. We just talk about like objects, right? So this is me embracing the fact that I am Miti Shambares. I am a cultural practitioner. I am no longer an investment banker. And that is the artifact that I found somewhere on my travels, which kind of just is part of this whole spiritual, psychic, personal, you know, now it's a personal calling. It is my purpose. And these are some of the objects that you will find, you know, in my bedroom or in my environs. Getting closer, this is a fertility doll. Now, every African culture has a fertility doll. And because my medicine, especially arrowroot, is very much about fertility, I've started collecting these, and I brought one to show you that you can take round. And this belongs to the Pokot. So literally, every community has one of these. If you'd like to take a look at it at some point, you can go around, yeah? So then we move into, we become more colonial with our product because for people to actually buy this all over the country and all over the world, we have to brand, we have to get into intellectual property, we have to repackage. So I brought this. So inside this is something called busareg, ash. And it is like, so made from a lot of leaves of 20 trees. It is used for intestinal problems. It is reduced to just an ash. So now when the ash, this amount in here, initially when I bought it from the person who made it, it was $2. By the time I do this to it, it is $15. So do you see like the difference once you sort of add the modern trappings? If I sell this in Europe, it is $45. So what I'm trying to really illustrate is how value is moving away from the original practitioner, and the more modern processes we add to it, the more valuable it gets. And so I suppose, so this is my company, that is me, and that is the branding. A little bit, that's one of my shops. Now, on the left, you'll see all those licenses that we now have to pay to do this work and to sell this product. We have to meet all those regulations. More on the regulations, the branding, all the different things we do. Again, now this is for the diaspora market, where you take it a step further and you're not allowed to use the indigenous name. So I can't use arrowroot or busareg ablelaitich. I now call my arrowroot womb wellness tea, and my tenderweight for the diaspora market, and my tenderweight I call it vitality refreshing tea for men, because I want to get it abroad. Otherwise, they destroy it at the border. I've had a lot of products destroyed in the US border and to Australia. My clients say, you have to get it to me. And I say, no problem. I change the labeling. But the minute I do that, I take it further away from the community because it is now hidden. It is all shrouded in mystery. Okay? Again, just showing you what our bottles look like. This is the one I brought here. This is the original content. These are original herbs. This is one of the formulations. Now, I want to quickly just show you this video because this is the person who created the product in here. So I want you to just get a feel for who these people are and how they sound and things like that. Just 1 minute of that. There isn't. We didn't invent the video. Okay, that's fine. So I think we didn't enable. You didn't enable the, do you know what I mean? It grabs from, but it's fine. So just to go back, so this is the community, and you can see in the middle that is Logong, also like a relative, and he's now the medicine man creating all this. This is the community we work with. All these people do, they do cultural, they plant the trees, we do the research. All the work we do with communities, we meet every December. That is the same hut. Actually, that is my auntie's hut. And we've come to love it because it really signifies how strong our culture is and how far it can take us. So I remember when we were young going from Nairobi, we thought, oh my God, these people, they're so backward. This is like the sixth world. But the most amazing thing is this is exactly what has brought us forward. And now I really have to think about the ones who went before us and what they were thinking, how they managed to live all these resources for us. So that's what we must do as well, create value, but at the same time, make sure the people coming after us manage to get this value, and at the same time preserve the environment. Very similar community engagement again, and they've all got our branding. That is me now when we do our, every December we go and we spend like a month there. Again, more community engagement, the same community. I wanted to bring it all the way here live to you. And same kind of stuff. So that is another part of the Rift Valley. This is the Kerio Valley, just illustrating what the resources look like or what's in there that hasn't really been monetized. And at the same time, what communities that actually live there. Sorry, my train of thought. It works? Yeah, let's play even one. So this is Logong when we had a community engagement.
Yon kale dit ngel lepta ko ga ke ber go busare ke na me busare age sisinga ke sisinga e ga singa o le gudi ki go gi ne ko chu chunga churukta ko sabe la ko na ma tu besyo ko ba ise ha gir ki ko ber ga bisa ko testanuni
ke gure na chonchono
inoni ke gure ni ke mingini ko noni ke gure njepchego ko noni ke gure sargute so ke na magri je tutugul age bel ko ga ge bel ko na ma go boys ke je tutto ko kasi tabla ko ne giten ago gri je bara ko ma nyolu ko sabla ko ma mi che ge moten en yo ko mi che ge moten la ko aya enyo ko atinya gatete
ke gure na chono
nonni ke gure ni ke gure ngoswe ko sa ne tinonni ko le tinonni ko ni go se burinde ko ni go maronge ko ni go chepchego ko nonni go kutungi tinonni
Those are the traditional names.
Ko inite sta ko boisie musarechu ite sta imweten la kwet ki sombu to mi mande azu ndaro to te mwete haita ke ta ga isambu ni mama ngata mungi kinda kana ki je pip ka ge boisie ne to uni so go che ga gi mila agi te gis keriche neni we not je just and they sabari inde ki bo chubo jot.
Great, so I'll just quickly again show you. If we go back, there's a lady also. So these are the practitioners, falling in that group, the elderly, marginalized, usually they don't speak any language apart from this one. And that was part of our program of documenting those stories. We have something like 400 videos of those. Those are just two, and we have a few of them on our page. But this is the kind of information, I know my time is up and everything, that we're trying to, to put that together so other people coming ahead of us can use. Okay, so thank you very much.
I mean, on behalf of the audience here, as well as the online audience, we're really glad that you shared your incredible work, as well as, and it's really interesting, specifically coming from an investment banker, this idea of profit sharing. Like, we don't think of investment bankers and think, wow, people who share profits ethically. That's not, it's not the thought that people get immediately. And so like it's really been a long journey for you, kind of rethinking, adapting newly to a different way of sharing resources and dividing tasks. So like for instance, out of everybody in the community, it is your task to be here to share this, and this is not the only place you've gone. There's several other places you've gone, and so the people in the community may not be moving, but because you carry them with you, you are moving together. Right. And so would you be able to tell us about, like, when you go back and you say, I went to such and such a place and I told people about you, what are their reactions and their feelings about this kind of position that they have given you to hold for them?
Okay, so that's really interesting. Thank you so much. So, I mean, as an example, all these videos, when we went and uploaded them on YouTube, when we went back to the village, in our last community engagement, we showed them. And I mean, they were laughing, like the practitioners were laughing, they were very amused. But even more, just yesterday, because I posted that we're in Iceland, you know, speaking about African botanicals and the Indigenous Forest, and between yesterday and today, we had 25,000 views, 349 comments, and 700 shares. That's a lot of people talking about, you know, like, wow, we're now in Iceland. And some people were saying to me, great, fantastic, but don't sell the formula. You know, they kept saying things like that, you know, go ahead and from Kenya to the world and show our products, because they understand now the value. I mean, the forest is now still intact because of the kind of work we do. And because everybody has heard about us, we're on all the digital media platforms, it means other forests are now becoming of interest for conservation by the Africans themselves. You know, every time I heard that the EU were here to preserve our forests, I used to think, but what about the Africans themselves? If you have the Africans want to plant 20 acres of potatoes, but you think you're coming to tell them preserve, and they have no incentive. But this is the biggest incentive to get the Africans, we ourselves, to conserve our own natural resources as we get some value.
I mean, I think it's really interesting that you point out the conservation work, especially because the forest, the way it is today, only exists because Africans have been there. Right, so this idea that, oh, you know, if you leave Africans to their own devices, the entire land will become desolate is insane and clearly, obviously, untrue.
Well, by virtue of the fact that when the colonists came the first time, Kenya had 87% tree cover, indigenous trees. And I think now we're at 7% or something like that. I think we have targets to go to 9%. I'm like, why 9%? Why can't we go to 50%? So the Africans were already conserving the forest. They were already using it judiciously, right? And they were extracting value, but making sure they return value as well. We talk about sustainable harvesting, the fact that when you use the bark of one of the older trees and you use one of the branches. Because if you come and strip it, so in the 70s, when they were taking away the logs,
the pruners,
what they would do is they would just strip the whole thing. And you know, the minute you strip it, the tree dies. So when we have massive extraction, we will destroy forests, whether we like it or not. So yes, the Africans have been doing this for a long time.
Harriet, I think one of the most exciting elements of your work is the ways in which you are putting an open bridge between people who are kind of doing contemporary medicine, health seeking, and by contemporary medicine we mean Western medicine, right? And then what is there for me in my own community that kind of understands what I'm going through and offers me relief, which for very many people might be the only thing they can afford, or it is the only place that offers them some sort of respite, because dealing with doctors, with nurses, can be a very traumatizing experience, right? And even for you, even getting the very best of healthcare in the very best of places, it was still not a place that had brought you relief until you found this plant that your people had been holding in trust for you until you met it, you know? Absolutely. And so what are the things that kind of dealing with the public in this very vulnerable place has taught you?
Okay, well, what I must say is when I first started doing this work, and there was a video that we did talking about the products, and we put up the video, and in the lifetime of that video, we got something like 2 million views, but I got bullied for the first year, I must say, because there was so much backlash. Because, you know, when we are traumatized, Africans are traumatized, so that even if you present to them a good thing, but it is in a traditional form, they think it's rubbish. So a lot of people would come and say, that's nonsense, you're a quack and you're a witch. Lots of people used to call me a witch and this, and I'm poisoning people and I don't have the necessary approvals. So there was so much backlash that first year that, I mean, there were many times I said, this is not for me. I was busy doing my work and nobody knew me, but now I was becoming infamous, so to speak, and then beginning to really understand what these regulations mean. Because for me, the product, it works, right? But for somebody else, it only works when it has a stamp from the government. And the government then becomes a gatekeeper. Because of my education, which privileges me, and the fact that I can speak the language this way, and I can go and apply for a visa, and I know what to put on that visa application so that I get it. And because of the work I do, I have the money to pay the visa fee. And I can jump on a plane and come here. So literally, my education privileges me. But listening to Logong, who was speaking, he wouldn't be able to come and convince you to take exactly the same thing that is in here. So, I mean, it was a very interesting experience. So we even have something called demystifying traditional medicine. We had to literally demystify, put it in shops, because some people say, if it's online, I don't believe you. You people are fake. Okay, we got a shop. Okay, you only have one shop. I'm in Kericho. Why don't you have a shop? We put a shop in Kericho. I'm in Mombasa. You don't have a shop. We put a shop there. You don't have any branding. We put the branding. You don't have any labels. We put the labels. You don't have standardized bottles. We did that. You don't have it in powder form. Oh, yes, now we do. You know? Well, do you ship to Australia? Yes, we do. So all these steps that we had to take was based on my business background, which in a sense privileges me again against all these other cultural practitioners. But that was my reaction, you know, really from the Africans. And what is so nice now is everybody has normalized it. Everybody now wants to go, oh yeah, I take traditional medicine. It's becoming very fashionable type thing. So again, the pendulum is swinging back. So it's very interesting, these narratives and conversations, because they change things. They do make a difference.
It's even sounding like you're kind of at the front line of kind of trying to bridge not just access to traditional healthcare and wellness, but also to bridge a change in attitudes towards traditional things, as well as a trust gap and a trust deficit. Because for so long, Africans were told, oh, your things are not as superior as, you know, contemporary medicine from the West and what have you. And then now you come and you're offering. So now each step that people take, the backlash, the pushback, is all about kind of bridging this gap such that people now have, this is one option of several existing options of traditional medicine that they can trust. Do you have any examples of like clients who came with a lot of, you know, deep skepticism that they were then projecting on you, and then they kind of had such a radical change in the ways that they were thinking?
Oh yes, I've had so many of those. I think we used to get them every single day. Somebody who comes and says to you, okay, my doctor says don't take mitishamba. Then I'll say, when we work with 4 doctors who have also turned their ideas around what it is that we do, or those who say, what about mental health? Will it affect my mental? I've got to speak to a psychiatrist. You have a lot of people who come and ask you, tell me the exact ingredients in this. And then I say, but do you know the ingredients in a Panadol? What's in a Panadol? What's in paracetamol? Do you know? And they don't know. So I say, then why are you demanding to interrogate me this way? How are you becoming a researcher? And it is true that when you deal with African plant medicine as an African, people start asking you those kind of questions, like what's in the tree? What are the bioactive components? If I take it, what will happen? Or what are the side effects? Or assuming there's going to be so many side effects. So those conversations, they're huge. I mean, I think that's why our page is so busy. People are always interrogating us, talking to us, you know, some insulting us sometimes, and the whole gamut of emotions is on that page. And I came to understand it's because it's a very emotive subject, because now you're telling people that this thing that they were told is bad is actually good. And so many are taking it in secret. There's women who need to conceive. Their marriages are falling apart. They don't have any children. And they're falling into that whole space of it's a taboo. You have no children or you have no sons. And then they come and take our products secretly. You know, they don't tell anybody. And then when it succeeds, it's a whole different story. Now they start telling everybody, every single person. So it's very emotional for us as Africans as well, coming back into ourselves.
You mentioned dealing with doctors and practitioners of Western medicine who have also been exposed to your product, and some of their patients are using it. What's their relationship with this medicine?
Okay, so I mean, it's kind of gone. We've had a initially very negative, because they'd say, do not. We don't know who that girl is. So many of them come and interrogate my educational qualifications and say, is she educated? Who is she? And a lot of other things. But now when you go to even Kenyatta Hospital, there was one woman who was due for surgery, and she took the product and it helped calm the pain and the inflammation. And the doctor said to her, oh, you've been to see that woman who's destroying all our business, haven't you? Then they all kind of laughed. That's a positive for me, because doctors are now talking about it. You know, Western educated doctors. So it's very interesting, sort of seeing what's happening. When you look at it now, you can think there's a whole big conversation happening, not just about traditional medicine, but traditional anything that is African, anything African really, because we import 80% and we don't believe in anything that we ourselves do, which is where we need to start from.
I think I remember you, and it would be great to share with this audience. You've talked about other African countries where there's really exciting things happening in the field of traditional medicine, and a similar journey like yours, finding ways to package and share beyond the immediate community of origin. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, there's, I think some countries, depending on the kind of colonization they had, retained a lot of their traditional medicine or cultures or lifestyle. So what happens in Mali or Senegal or Gambia is very different from what happens in Kenya, Zambia, and South Africa, maybe because we had direct rule. If you go into the Congo, where it was very difficult for anyone to really penetrate because of the jungle, the weather, and the environment, you find that is where they have a lot of secrets, a lot of ancient remedies, a lot of different ways of doing things. So it's now a revolution. Then if you go to the diaspora, if you go to England, if you go to Germany or America, the African Americans, the black British, the black French, they want the traditional stuff. So initially I thought, well, you know, when I make this product, I'll just sell to the black British, because they want to reconnect back with their African roots. So it's just so much going on everywhere.
That's super interesting. I guess maybe the last question that I'll ask you before we open up for people to be able to ask you what they want is that another fun element of the work that you do that's in its community rootedness is your multi-generational appeal. So like you're someone who sells all this medicine, but then the stuff that Harriet's Botanicals is doing with young children, and the stuff that you're doing with young people and young women, and then there's the stuff that you're doing with the older people who are the custodians of knowledge. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about the ways in which your work has kind of opened up conversations across such a wide range of people.
Okay, so for instance, the people who gather, when they go to the forest to gather, the people who gather it are usually young boys and girls. And I have other pictures where they are involved in the making of the medicine. We have an internship program in Nairobi for people to learn about how business works. What is really missing, let's say, in the modern sense is business, because lots of people don't know entrepreneurs who succeeded with this kind of stuff. So when we're talking about scale, talking about branding and marketing, we have a lot of young people working for us. I have an intern actually who's still in school, but she works for me during the holiday, and I call her the future CEO of Harriet Botanicals, because I always say I must pass this on to somebody else. We work with Litane's Children's Home. We support them deliberately, intentionally, because you know, this is the group of people who we believe will be looking for jobs afterwards, and they are beginning to learn about traditional medicine, but from a modern perspective. We work with Litane Mission Hospital. We actually rebuilt the maternity ward, the women's ward, the men's medical ward, the men's surgical ward, and where the women have their babies. We actually went and did some work in there, because I wanted to really show the close connection between fertility, traditional medicine associated with women, and like a maternity ward. I wanted to make that connection very strong. So our CSR really is targeting the hospitals also to introduce that allopathic alternative connection. So then we're trying to show doctors we are willing to even support hospitals, but this is what it is that we do, and that people can learn more. So people who are in the hospital, who are in the villages, are no longer scared of going to the hospital, because in as much as we deal with traditional medicine, we also support the hospital. So this is kind of how we tie it all together. Then we work with women, of course, women groups, teenagers coming into their menses. We have a journal that is targeting teenagers where they can actually record their menses and demystify this whole process, because nobody talks about it, painful periods. We work in the wellness communities as well. Then we work with men, because we have a product for prostate cancer, prostate inflammation, because we are saying to African men, don't be so stoic. You might also be having some issues, and there's actually no shame in it. So there's a lot to do, and we do a lot. Sometimes we do, a lot of too much, so that we're not doing enough. We're not going deep. But we're hoping that with time we can do more.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Let's give her a hand, please.
Thanks.
Is there anybody who has a question for Harriet as regards her products? If you're curious about particular products, if you're like, I want to see what's that in the thing, that's a legitimate question.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your work. It's really fascinating. I maybe just want to share what's on my mind. I'm not totally sure yet about it. So, but I'm just having this intuition that your work shows that there's this need for reconnecting to forests wherever we live, right? And so I'm immediately tempted to take your product, right, to alleviate my pain during my period. But then I'm wondering, well, is this now the idea that I'm taking something from an African forest, which might help me, or shouldn't I somehow connect to the nature where I live? I'm from Germany, and and now in Iceland. So, yeah. And I'm wondering, what do you think about this with respect to the vision of your business? Because it's great. And you said that there's this kind of repercussions of you grow your business that builds an incentive for the African people to conserve the forests. I think this is all, it's complex. So I wanted to put this out there, and just wondering what you think about this question of that we have to connect to our local places to find the remedies from nature, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we are just an example. I think because for us, we have been so disconnected from the forest and disconnected from forest products that we ourselves create. So the bigger initiative for us is to do that. And when we come to Europe and talk about our product, it's our way of showing there is value. So if we need to monetize, then we will sell it out of the country and say, okay, fair enough, for us not to cut down the whole forest for charcoal. I talked about the charcoal value as opposed to the medicinal value. Then we can say, in Europe, for instance, Prunus africana is very valuable. If we need to cut down 1 or 2 trees and make $20,000, which will go a long way to helping the entire community, we will. At the same time, of course, we do encourage the whole sustainable living, the wellness, having your own little organic farm, identifying the trees around you, how they are used, indigenous trees in Europe as well, though I don't know much about the programs that are here, but I'm pretty sure there's places here, even in places like Iceland, where you can't interfere with indigenous forests. So we're mapping onto countries that have been very specific and intentional about their indigenous products. So over here, for instance, what I find very interesting is what we call indigenous and traditional is still seen as an alternative in Kenya. People are still going for Western medicine. But here, you've taken the indigenous and traditional and mainstreamed it. So all these spas and all these beautiful things, working with nature, you don't say this is traditional Icelandic spa versus the Western spa. We're still doing that back home. So we're trying to mainstream our products and sort of be like everybody else. Even in India, they have Ayurvedic medicine. They don't say this is traditional. There's Western medicine that's better for you. Then you use traditional. No, they just say Ayurvedic medicine, everybody uses it. Chinese medicine, everybody uses it. If you go to London, you can go to Chinatown, you can get Indian medicine, you can get American medicine, you can go to an apothecary, you can go everywhere. But have you noticed you can't go to an African medicine shop? In any part of the world, you can find every other person's medicines but ours. So that's the point I'm really trying to to emphasize, okay?
I think I want to kind of touch on the question you asked, which I think is a really important question. It's like, do I, as a German, how do I consume, you know, traditional medicine from an African, you know, can I do that ethically? Is the question I think you're asking, and I mean, I think the answer is. The answer is complex, like you said. I think, for instance, Harriet has gone to a lot of lengths to show us that her business is an ethical business, that there's so much flowing back into the community. I think a both-and approach is really useful. As regards, it is possible to consume this particular product, if it's the product that works for you, in my home, and in the whole of Africa consuming Zinat or whatever random, you know, antibacterial, which was made wherever. It could have been made in Germany, it could have been made in, you see, so in that sense, you are, in the same way that you drink coffee that could have come from Kenya, it's the same kind of thing. And that sometimes on the coffee they'll write fair trade and harvested by, you know, Njoki Ngumi or something, you know, so that's how people are going out of their way to say that this is fairly traded. So I feel like, and especially in this kind of decolonial approach, harnessing and understanding and working with the abundance of the earth means that we have to take a both-and approach, that you can take medicine that's ethically sourced in Kenya, and especially when your own kind of ideas of what ethical sourcing means have been met. And then you can work with the forest in your house. So if you do either or, it might overcomplicate the thing, as opposed to saying, how do I do everything that then allows me to live a more connected life, and a more aware life, and a more conscious life, and a life that I consider more beautiful, you know. Oh, wow, I've been told there's 2 minutes. Is there a burning question? Okay.
For introducing us to what you're doing. Here in Iceland, I come from the university, and there's increasing research into Icelandic plants as part of the pharmacology here. So, and also they have begun to market some plant-based medicine here and export them, so it's happening. And it's mainly been women in the pharmacology that have started this. Interestingly,
Wonderful.
like everywhere, you know, women are kind of closer to plants. I don't know why. And is there research in Kenya, in Nairobi, you know, within pharmacology there that you are also supported by?
Yes, so actually, before I got my certification as a cultural practitioner, I had to take my products to the University of Nairobi Pharmacology and Pharmacognosy Department, where they had to examine the plants and come up with a report. And that report is what helped me now. I went to the ministry and got my certification. So what I find very interesting is the same with my intellectual property, is the person who actually helped me do that. She's also from my community, and she's a doctor in pharmacology. She's head of the department. So she did it, she helped me, I think, because we're both from the same community, we both know about the products. At the same time, we also went to school together, but she put that stamp of approval based on the fact that she had a Western education. And the same person who also helped me with my intellectual property at one point was actually head of Kenya Intellectual Property Institute. He has a PhD as well in intellectual property law, and he also went to a similar school and from my community as well. So in the beginning, I think they were just trying to help me. They were like, oh, poor little thing, she's not going to go very far with this. But I think the product just simply exploded. And because of that impetus, now more and more institutions are looking at the research. More people are saying, let's do it this way. Let me give you my doctor's reports. Even the doctors we work with say, I'm going to look at 100 patients, I'm going to give them the product, and I'm going to write a report. Then the report goes a long way to now another institution or another person who's interested. So it's still a very young, it's young in a sense, but it is growing. Yeah.
Any more burning question? If it's like one and it's like short. Yes, okay, so let's give Harriet a hand. Thank you so much.